Ever notice how the most important places in the world are sometimes the ones you've never heard of? Not New York, not Beijing, not even Tokyo. Try a windy stretch of ocean called the Bashi Channel. Yeah, that strip of water separating the Philippines and Taiwan. It just became the Indo-Pacific's most awkward family reunion. O-Pacific's most awkward family reunion because the United States, the Philippines, and Japan decided to show up together with warships. And let's just say, Beijing noticed. This wasn't just another routine patrol. This was the 15th Multilateral Maritime Cooperative activity, and for the first time, it expanded beyond the South China Sea and went north, way north, right up near Taiwan, which is geopolitically equivalent to throwing a barbecue in your backyard while your neighbor insists the yard belongs to him. So what exactly happened in the Bashi Channel? Why does it matter? And why does this feel like the Indo-Pacific chessboard just lost its patience? Let's break it down. First, geography check, because maps don't lie, but they do intimidate. The Bashi Channel sits between northern Luzon in the Philippines and Taiwan. At its narrowest, Taiwan is just a little over 100 kilometers from the Philippines. That's closer than most people's daily commute in Metro Manila traffic. And this waterway isn't just scenic ocean blue. It's a choke point, a strategic funnel connecting the South China Sea to the Pacific Ocean. Military vessels, submarines, commercial shipping, they all pass through here. If the South China Sea is the front door, the Bashi Channel is the emergency exit. And in geopolitics, whoever controls the exits controls the game. But here's where it gets spicy. China considers Taiwan its territory. It has not ruled out taking it by force. And if anything ever happened in the Taiwan Strait, guess what waters would immediately matter? Exactly. Now suddenly, this joint patrol isn't just about maritime cooperation, it's about contingency planning. And that's where the plot thickens. Because this wasn't a casual sail and wave moment. This was layered, coordinated, deliberate. The armed forces of the Philippines conducted joint naval and air drills with the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command and Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force. And when I say drills, I don't mean friendly laps around the ocean. We're talking communications checks, anti-submarine warfare exercises, replenishment at sea maneuvers, tactical formation drills, live fire gunnery exercises. Yes, live fire. The Philippine Navy deployed the guided missile frigate BRP Antonio Luna, armed and ready, complete with an AW-159 helicopter on board. The U.S. sent the guided missile destroyer USS Dewey. Japan contributed a P-3 Orion maritime patrol aircraft. The Philippine Air Force rolled out FA-50 fighter jets and A-29 Super Tucanos. This wasn't symbolic. This was interoperability on display. Think of it like 3 different phone brands suddenly proving they all run on the same operating system. And that operating system? Deterrence. But wait, because here's the twist. While these exercises were happening, Chinese Navy ships were spotted nearby, not aggressively engaging, not firing, just watching. You know that feeling when someone says, "I'm not mad," but they're definitely mad. The People's Liberation Army Navy had vessels hovering near the exercise box, sometimes only a few nautical miles away. In previous years, they stayed on the horizon. Now, they're stepping closer. That shift alone tells you something, because proximity is messaging, and this entire patrol was messaging. Now let's zoom out. Why is this such a big deal? Because this was the first time these multilateral maritime cooperative activities expanded north of the traditional South China Sea hotspots like Scarborough Shoal. This signals a strategic evolution. For years, the flashpoint was the West Philippine Sea, contested reefs, water cannons, ramming incidents. But now, the northern maritime approaches are being fortified, specifically near the Philippines' northernmost island, Mavulis. And if you remember, Philippine military leadership has openly discussed strengthening forces there in preparation for a possible Taiwan contingency. That's not paranoia, that's geography. If something happens in Taiwan, the Philippines will not be a spectator. It will be geographically adjacent. And alliances matter in adjacency. Which brings us to something even bigger. This patrol wasn't just about 3 countries sailing together. It was about normalization. The more these patrols happen, the less shocking they become. And the less shocking they become, the stronger the signal. This is routine. Get used to it. Last year, a U.S. Nimitz-class carrier strike group joined similar patrols. Japan participated, Australia participated, even France. It's slowly becoming a club. And the membership requirement? Commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. Now here's the kicker. The U.S. and the Philippines announced more than 500 military engagements planned for 2026. 500. That's not occasional cooperation, that's structural alignment. The two countries have been holding these defense board meetings since 1958, but in recent years, the tempo has surged. The Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement expanded. More U.S. access to Philippine bases, more joint drills, more interoperability. And Japan, increasingly involved, which makes sense. Japan relies heavily on these sea lanes for energy imports. If the Bashi Channel becomes unstable, Tokyo feels it economically almost instantly. So from Manila's perspective, this patrol strengthens northern defense. From Washington's perspective, it reinforces deterrence around Taiwan. From Tokyo's perspective, it protects lifelines. And from Beijing's perspective, it looks like encirclement. China responded by accusing the Philippines of disrupting regional peace by inviting countries outside the region. But here's the counter-argument. The Philippines argues these patrols are within its exclusive economic zone, protected under the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. That same legal framework rejected China's sweeping 9-line claims in 2016. So legally, Manila says it's exercising sovereign rights. Strategically, it's building insurance. Because at the end of the day, small and mid-sized powers don't survive on hope. They survive on partnerships. And the Bashi Channel Patrol just showed that partnership muscle. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This wasn't just about ships and jets. The Philippine Coast Guard participated too, signaling a whole-of-nation approach. Civilian maritime enforcement standing beside naval power. That's not accidental. It blurs the line between defense and sovereignty enforcement. It says, this isn't militarization, this is protection. And the live-fire exercise conducted by BRP Antonio Luna that validated combat readiness under realistic conditions. Translation: if needed, we're not rehearsing from scratch. Now breathe, because this is where Section 1 ends, but the real strategic implications, they're just getting started. We still need to unpack how this ties into U.S. carrier deployments, why China is stepping closer to the exercise perimeter, what this means for a Taiwan contingency, and whether the Philippines is becoming a frontline state in the Indo-Pacific rivalry. And trust me, the next layer is even more intense. Perfect. Buckle up. So we just watched 3 nations conduct coordinated patrols in one of the most sensitive waterways on the planet. Cool headline, but here's the real question. Was this just a patrol, or was it a rehearsal? Because when you look at the bigger picture, this wasn't an isolated event. It's part of a pattern, and patterns in geopolitics are like plot twists in thrillers. They're never random. Let's rewind slightly. Over the past year, U.S. carrier strike groups have been rotating through the South China Sea. We've seen the USS Nimitz operate in disputed waters. The USS Abraham Lincoln conducted live fire drills in the region. Amphibious assault ships like USS Tripoli have been forward deployed with Marine Expeditionary Units. That's not tourism, that's presence. And presence in deterrence theory equals credibility. Now connect that to the Bashi Channel Patrol. If something were to escalate in the Taiwan Strait, the geography would force U.S. and allied forces to operate through the Philippine archipelago, especially the northern Luzon corridor. So what do you do before a crisis? You practice. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. That's what these multilateral maritime cooperative activities are becoming. Muscle memory for coalition warfare. And here's the transition nobody talks about. China is adjusting too. Remember how earlier patrols saw Chinese ships observing from the horizon? Now they're entering the exercise box. Not firing, not ramming, just closer. That subtle shift matters, because in strategic language, proximity is pressure. It's a way of saying, we see you, and we're not backing up. And yet, they're not escalating either. Why? Because deterrence works both ways. China doesn't want accidental conflict. The U.S. doesn't want accidental conflict. The Philippines certainly doesn't. So instead, we get this calibrated dance. Warships shadowing warships, aircraft monitoring aircraft, high-stakes choreography. But here's where this becomes personal for Manila. For decades, the Philippines was primarily focused on internal security, insurgencies, counterterrorism, domestic stability. Now, it's pivoting outward, from counterinsurgency to territorial defense. That is not a small shift. That's a generational doctrinal transformation. And the northern maritime approaches, especially around the Batanes island chain, are suddenly front and center. Why Batanes? Because it's the Philippines' northern shield. If Taiwan is ever destabilized, airspace and sea lanes near Batanes would immediately become critical, and strengthening that area sends a clear signal. The Philippines will not be strategically blind in its own backyard. The United States has around 750 overseas bases globally. In Asia-Pacific alone, over 120. Japan hosts more than 50,000 U.S. troops. The Philippines now hosts expanded access under EDCA, with additional sites approved in recent years. This matters because logistics wins wars, not tweets, not speeches, logistics. And when you combine U.S. basing access, Japanese maritime capabilities, and Philippine geographic positioning, you get a triangle. A strategic triangle right along China's maritime periphery. From Beijing's lens, that feels like encirclement. From Manila's lens, it feels like insurance. And here's the fascinating twist. The Philippines isn't acting alone out of fear. It's acting out of leverage. Energy discoveries in its exclusive economic zone, including offshore gas fields near Palawan.
A significant natural gas discovery has been made. It's estimated to contain around 98 billion cubic feet of gas in place.
Raised the stakes in the West Philippine Sea. Securing maritime rights isn't theoretical anymore. It's economic survival. So when Manila conducts joint patrols, it's not just flexing muscle. It's protecting potential multi-billion-dollar energy reserves. That changes behavior. Now here's the next hook. What happens if this trend continues? We're already seeing France join patrols. Australia is involved. India is increasing Indo-Pacific naval activity. If more middle powers plug into these maritime cooperative frameworks, the Bashi Channel could become part of a broader multinational deterrence architecture. And the more multinational it becomes, the harder it is for any one power to dominate it unilaterally. That's the long game. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The Philippines is walking a tightrope. Deepening defense ties with Washington and Tokyo strengthens deterrence. But it also places Manila squarely inside great power rivalry. That's not neutral territory. That's strategic exposure. So the real question becomes, is the Philippines becoming a frontline state? Geographically, it already is. Politically, it's getting closer. Militarily, these 500-plus planned engagements in 2026 suggest institutional momentum. And momentum in defense cooperation tends to compound. Now let's pivot to Taiwan, the elephant in the channel. Any conflict scenario involving Taiwan would immediately impact Philippine airspace and waters, refugee flows, supply routes, military staging considerations. The Philippines cannot opt out of geography, which is why these patrols north of Luzon are so significant. They normalize coordination in waters that would be critical during any contingency. And normalization reduces hesitation during crisis. That's strategic foresight. But let's not dramatize unnecessarily. Nothing fired, nothing escalated. This was still labeled as routine. China called it provocative. Manila called it sovereign. Washington called it interoperability. 3 narratives, 1 ocean. And that's the modern Indo-Pacific. Layered, complex, and highly performative. Because here's the deeper layer most people miss. Deterrence isn't about war, it's about making war look too expensive to attempt. And trilateral patrols in sensitive choke points, they increase that perceived cost. So when you step back and look at the Bashi Channel patrol, you're not just seeing ships sailing, you're seeing alliance signaling, contingency rehearsal, maritime domain awareness expansion, sovereignty assertion, strategic messaging to Beijing, economic security protection, all packed into a few days of drills. That's dense geopolitics. Now here's the final transition, and this is where you come in. The Indo-Pacific is entering a phase where middle powers are no longer passive observers. They're active shapers. The Philippines is not just reacting anymore. It's aligning. and alignment changes balance. So the next time you hear about routine maritime exercises, remember this: routine is strategic. Routine builds habits. Habits build readiness. And readiness shapes outcomes before a single shot is fired. The Bashi Channel just became a symbol, not of war, but of preparation. And preparation is power. If you want deeper breakdowns like this, fast, sharp, no fluff, hit subscribe, because the Indo-Pacific isn't slowing down, and neither are we. Drop your take in the comments. Is this smart deterrence by Manila, or is the Philippines stepping too close to the fire? Let's talk. And I'll see you in the next